So Matt Gaetz and Marjorie Taylor Greene have been doing this tour, or they want to do this tour, the America First tour, where it's like this joint fundraising thing, and it's also like a pro-Trump circle jerk. So they were trying to get these particular venues, and they were canceled on at least twice, maybe 3 times. But let me show you what one of the venues said. This is from Anaheim. Planned America First rally canceled. A planned America First rally at a private venue in our city is canceled. The city of Anaheim shared public safety concerns with the operator, and those concerns were shared by the operator. Okay, that's a weird sentence. As a city, we respect free speech, but also have a duty to call out speech that does not reflect our city and its values. Okay, so I've actually read contradicting things on the venue. It looks like the venues that have canceled on them are private venues, but it's weird because if it's the Anaheim City thing, then that's not private. I guess maybe if it's an indoor thing, it's private. I honestly, I don't know. Some things I've read said that it's a private venue. Others say it's public, or at least semi-public. So here's, from a legal perspective, this is the way it is. If it's a private venue, even though I don't necessarily agree with this, if it's a private venue, they technically have the legal right to cancel on whoever they want to cancel on and to allow to speak whoever they want to allow to speak. That's the way it worked with a private venue. Now, again, I'm a deep believer in free speech. I think, if anything, free speech protection should be expanded even to the workplace. So, I wouldn't necessarily agree with canceling on people if you don't agree with them, but they technically have the legal right. Now, if it's public outlet and the public officials are just shutting down speech they don't agree with, I think that's a different legal situation. The government shouldn't be in the business of picking and choosing what opinions are and aren't acceptable. Now, you could say, hey, the government's not going to lock them up over their speech, so that would be a violation of their free speech. This is not. But I definitely say at least the principle of free speech is being violated here. If it's a public venue and the public venue had agreed and then they canceled because they don't agree with Marjorie Taylor Greene or with Matt Gaetz. So the legal situation, I think, does change slightly based on whether it's a public venue or a private venue. But having said that, I mean, listen, even though I despise what these people stand for with every fiber of my being, Marjorie Taylor Greene is like the next Sarah Palin or Michelle Bachmann, just total airhead, but she's even more like angry and arrogant than they were. So it's not even like the folksy charm with the stupidity. It's like the angry, I'm going to tell you how it is, even though I'm a moron energy. So despise her. Total conspiracy theorist, at least Q adjacent, probably maybe full QAnon. Matt Gaetz is doing everything he can to try to distract from the charges that are, out there now about him with the relationships with the very young women, maybe some underage, or relationships with them, and they're traveling between states, so it's like sex trafficking technically or whatever. He's trying so hard to distract. He's also going all in on his pro-Britney Spears stuff, which, good, I'm pro-Britney Spears, but Matt Gaetz, why are you talking about this? Because he's trying to distract from all that stuff. So I despise these people. But having said all that, whether it's a private venue or a public venue, if you agree to it, follow through on it. And they did agree to it, so follow through on it. And here's the main thing that I keep coming back to. There's a lot of people out there who think AOC and Bernie Sanders are, the next incarnation of Mao. And they're evil, and they're terrible, and they're authoritarian. And listen, those people are dead wrong about everything they're believing and saying, for sure. But there are people who would cancel on them simply because they are them, and they don't agree with their ideology. And if a private venue or a public venue canceled on Bernie or AOC or Noam Chomsky or whatever, I would say that's Weasley, and you shouldn't really do that. Because this is America. They have a right to speak their mind. And if people want to see it, who are you to, get in between and say, we don't want them to see it, or we don't want them to use our stage or whatever to get the message out. I just don't agree with that. I mean, in the early, I think it was like 1939 or something, in Madison Square Garden, there was like a fucking Nazi rally. Then there's the famous Supreme Court Skokie case, where the Supreme Court said, the KKK has the right to march through a predominantly Jewish and minority neighborhood as long as they're being peaceful. Now, the message is hateful, genocidal, and terrible, but as long as they're marching peacefully and they're not doing direct threats of violence, and they weren't, they're allowed to do it. that was viewed as, a cornerstone, fundamental free speech case in the U.S. And what everybody understood at the time, which now people don't understand nearly as much, is that is what freedom is. That's true freedom. Freedom is when you can get on the soapbox and advocate for, complete communism or anarchism or fascism or whatever, and you're allowed to say it. This is the whole idea of freedom. You don't need free speech protection so that you can say, I love mommy and apple pie is delicious and rainbows are pretty. You don't need those protections because everybody's going to agree with you on that. You need it specifically for the people who are advocating the ideas that are out there. So I despise Matt Gaetz and Marjorie Taylor Greene, but whether it's a private venue or a public venue, you let them speak. And if it was Bernie, I hope they would say the same thing. Now, by the way, I don't really think they would, because these guys are hypocrites. They're not actually principled in their belief in free speech, but I am. And so, the same way I said Milo had the right to speak at Berkeley or whatever when there was a riot over that, or Ann Coulter has the right to speak, by the same token, Abby Martin was canceled from an event because she's critical of Israel and she's for Palestinian rights, and they view that as, unacceptable at the place she was going to speak, and they canceled on her. It may have been a public university. Rania Khalek was canceled, maybe over her beliefs on Syria. I mean, you don't want to open this door to banning people simply based on what their politics are. Everybody has a right to speak in this country. Now, again, private venue technically has the right to ban them, but Twitter technically has the right to ban Antifa accounts from Twitter, and they did, and they shouldn't have. And so they shouldn't have banned Matt Gaetz and Marjorie Taylor Greene. I don't know why this isn't an easy position to grasp. You can hate the person, you can hate the ideology, you can think they're total idiots and wrong about everything, and they pretty much are. But don't do stuff like this, and definitely don't celebrate it, because it's going to come for you. It probably already has come for you, and you didn't even realize. People on your team, people with your ideology. In order to have a YouTube that allows me to run my mouth, you need a YouTube that allows Ben Shapiro to run his mouth. It's a package deal. There's no way around it, and it's the same for this. So hopefully everybody understands that. As much as I despise these people, they shouldn't have canceled. And by the way, I didn't even tell you the biggest part of the story, which influences my opinion on this, by the way. So like I said, contradictory stuff out there, whether it's public or private venue. But what we know for sure is public officials put pressure on the venue, whoever is in control of the venue, which then leads me to believe it's private. It's a private venue. But public officials put pressure on them. And the whole thing about safety concerns is not true. It's not accurate. It was made up. It's a rationalization. So for public officials to pressure a venue to not allow them to speak because we don't like them, that's unacceptable, because that's the government at the state level or the local level, forcing out somebody for ideological and political reasons. That's not okay. That's not okay.